Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be exploring some fascinating ideas today, all about the impact of emerging technologies. You've shared some really thought-provoking selections from Mustafa Suleiman's book, The Coming Wave.
Is a great book.
It is, and it really gets you thinking about the future. But instead of trying to predict what's going to happen, let's explore the powerful forces that are already shaping our world right now.
Okay, sounds good.
So we're talking AI, synthetic biology, all these incredible advances that have the potential for both progress and risk.
Right, like that anecdote about the AI learning to tunnel in that Atari game. Remember that one?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. That's not just following rules. It's like the AI discovering knowledge on its own.
It really highlights the power of these technologies.
Absolutely. And Suleiman uses this really interesting metaphor of technological waves, these clusters of innovations that transform society.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah, like he compares it to the invention of the internal combustion engine, right?
Yeah.
And its impact on transportation. You can see how that one invention completely reshaped the world.
Totally. And it's fascinating to think about how much faster these waves are accelerating now. Changes that once took centuries are happening in decades.
It's mind-boggling when you think about it that way.
Like imagine a kid who grew up with horse-drawn carriages.
Right.
And then they lived to see airplanes and atomic energy.
Yeah, it's a completely different world.
It makes you wonder what's next.
Exactly. So what's driving this new wave that we're in right now? Suleiman points to two core technologies: AI, artificial intelligence, and synthetic biology.
Two huge fields, both developing incredibly quickly.
And what's really interesting is how they're intertwined, you know? Advances in one fuel advances in the other. It's like this feedback loop of innovation.
Yeah, they're feeding off each other.
So let's talk about the scale of these technologies. I mean, the computational power of modern AI models is just...
It's insane. It's equivalent to billions of people working with calculators. And that's not even considering the algorithms and the learning capability.
It's not just brute force, it's...
It's intelligence.
Yeah.
Like, remember AlphaFold? It solved the protein folding problem, which would have taken longer than the age of the universe with traditional methods.
That's AI driving scientific breakthroughs right there. It's amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
But it also brings us to this crucial question of containment. How do we control these powerful technologies? How do we make sure they're used for good?
Right. How do we make sure things don't get out of hand?
And Silliman points out that throughout history, containing new technology has been really, really difficult. Things tend to spread rapidly, often with unintended consequences.
He does mention nuclear weapons as a partial exception.
Right. They've been largely contained because of the cost, the complexity, and obviously the terrifying potential.
But even then, that containment is fragile, right? It relies on a lot of luck and cooperation.
Absolutely. And then you think about other attempts at containment, like chemical weapons, CFCs, GMOs. It shows just how complex this issue is.
And with AI and synthetic biology moving so fast, this question of containment becomes even more urgent.
Definitely. And that's where Suleiman lays out these four features of this coming wave that make it particularly challenging. The first is accessibility. These technologies are becoming cheaper, easier to use, more widely available.
Right, so more people have access to them.
Think about those Ukrainian soldiers using off-the-shelf drones against a much larger military force.
It's a great example of how accessible technology can shift the balance of power.
And then there's the issue of dual use. A lot of these technologies have both civilian and military applications, making it harder to draw a clear line.
Like that AI designed for playing games could potentially be repurposed for something a lot more dangerous.
Exactly. And it's not just about controlling access. It's about recognizing the unprecedented power these technologies have. They can reshape society in ways we've never seen before. It's not just an incremental change. It's
a whole new ballgame.
Yeah. And then you add in the exponential speed of development. It's like trying to hit a moving target. It's hard enough to keep up, let alone regulate it effectively.
So we have incredibly powerful technologies becoming more accessible and developing faster than ever. And to make things even more complicated, Suleiman says these technologies also act as fragility amplifiers.
Meaning?
Meaning they can make existing problems even worse.
Okay, I see where this is going. It's not just the risks of the technologies themselves, it's how they interact with our current challenges.
Exactly. Like cyber warfare, for example. Nation-states are more and more vulnerable to attacks that could cripple critical infrastructure.
Like that WannaCry attack.
It's terrifying to think it was stopped by pure chance.
Just a 22-year-old hacker finding a kill switch.
Yeah, talk about fragile systems.
I
And
mean,
then there's misinformation, something we're already dealing with a lot.
Yeah, but AI-powered deepfakes and disinformation campaigns could take that to a whole new level. like eroding trust in institutions, sowing chaos.
It's already happening. Remember that deep fake video of the politician in India?
It was so convincing. It's scary how easily this technology can be used to spread lies.
And then there are the biorisks. With synthetic biology, the potential for accidental release or even deliberate release of engineered pathogens.
It doesn't bear thinking about.
It's a huge concern. Like the whole debate around gain-of-function research, it has the potential to be incredibly beneficial, but also incredibly dangerous.
The risk of something going wrong is very real.
And, of course, we can't forget about job displacement. AI and automation could lead to massive unemployment and social unrest.
It's like a modern-day Luddite movement.
It's a valid fear. People are worried by being replaced by machines. And it's not just blue-collar jobs either.
It's white-collar jobs, too.
So we've got these powerful technologies, rapid development, existing problems they could amplify. It paints a pretty bleak picture, doesn't it?
It's definitely a lot to consider.
And that's where Suleiman lays out this central dilemma. Failing to contain this wave could lead to catastrophe, but trying to control it too tightly
Could lead to a dystopia.
right, like a surveillance state where our freedom is sacrificed for security.
He gives some pretty chilling examples.
Yeah, like China's surveillance system. It's a
Yeah.
glimpse into a future we don't want.
But he also challenges this assumption that progress is always good.
It's not always a straight line upwards, is it?
He suggests that stagnation could be just as catastrophic.
So it's not about stopping progress. It's about finding the right path, the path that balances innovation and responsibility.
Create a middle ground.
And that's where he introduces his 10 steps towards containment.
10 steps. That's a lot to unpack.
It's not a set of easy answers. It's more like a framework for navigating this really complex dilemma.
It requires all of us working together. Technologists, governments, citizens. We all have a role to play.
So some of the steps that really stood out to me were technical safety, building safeguards into these technologies from the very beginning.
Like kill switches.
Yeah. And then there's audits and transparency, making sure these powerful systems are scrutinized by independent experts.
To catch problems early and prevent abuse.
And of course, global cooperation. We need to be working together across borders to manage these global challenges.
No single nation can tackle this alone.
And finally, public engagement. We need to be talking about this stuff, raising awareness, and fostering a culture of responsible innovation.
Because ultimately, it's up to all of us to decide what kind of future we want.
So much to think about. I think the big takeaway here is that we're at a crossroads, a pivotal moment in history. The choices we make now will have huge consequences down the line.
Yeah, there's a lot at stake.
It's exciting and terrifying all at the same time.
Definitely. It makes you really appreciate the need for careful consideration and thoughtful action.
Absolutely. We need to be proactive, not reactive.
And we need to remember that we're not just shaping our own future, but the future of generations to come.
Well said. It's a lot of responsibility, but it's also a chance to build a better world.
We were talking about global cooperation, right? How we need to work together to contain this wave of new technologies. It's a huge challenge. But there are historical examples that give me some hope, at least.
That's good to hear. I mean, it seems incredibly difficult to get different countries, especially those with competing interests, to agree on something as complex as regulating AI or synthetic biology.
You're not wrong. But the potential consequences of not doing anything are just too great to ignore. These challenges go beyond borders.
Yeah, a pandemic doesn't care about geography.
Exactly. And the impacts of AI, synthetic biology, those could be felt globally as well. We're all connected.
You're right. So what can we learn from the past? What examples are you thinking of?
Well, Suleiman mentions the Montreal Protocol. Remember that one? They successfully phased out CFCs that were destroying the ozone layer.
Yeah.
And then there's the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which, while not perfect, has helped to limit the spread of nuclear weapons.
Those are definitely major achievements. But these new technologies, they seem almost harder to control, like they're so ingrained in our lives already.
That's true. But think about it this way. The stakes are even higher now. The potential for harm is so much greater. We can't just sit back and wait.
You're right. So what does Suleiman propose?
He talks about the need for a new kind of techno-diplomacy. We need experts who really understand these technologies, who can work together across borders to set standards and regulations. It's a new way of thinking about diplomacy, it's not.
Not just traditional diplomats anymore.
Exactly. You need scientists, engineers, ethicists, all working together to understand the challenges.
It sounds like it would require a huge shift in how we approach international relations.
It does. And he also emphasizes the need to engage with the public. We can't have experts making all these decisions in secret. People need to be part of the conversation. They need to.
Have a say in how these technologies are used.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But how do you explain these complex issues in a way that people can understand? That's the challenge.
it is. Because if you don't understand something, it's easy to be afraid of it or dismissive of it.
It's about finding the right balance. We need to make these ideas accessible and relatable without oversimplifying them. It's about empowering people, not scaring them.
Right, because fear can lead to bad decisions.
Exactly. Suleiman talks about building a global movement for responsible innovation. Sounds ambitious, I know, but I think people are ready for this conversation there.
Ready to take control of their future.
Yeah. It's about creating a culture where we think about the ethical implications of technology right from the start.
So it's not just about profits and progress, it's about values.
Exactly. And this brings us to a more controversial aspect of Suleiman's framework, the idea of actually limiting access to some technologies. It's a tricky one.
It is. Because on one hand, we want to encourage innovation, but on the other hand, we have to protect humanity.
He uses the example of nuclear weapons. The Non-Proliferation Treaty has had some success, but those weapons are still out there. And it's scary to think about what could happen if they fall into the wrong hands. And with things like AI and synthetic biology, the consequences could be even worse. They could be.
Almost unimaginable.
It raises this dilemma. Do we prioritize openness and risk accelerating the development of dangerous technologies? Or do we restrict access and potentially stifle innovation? There's no easy answer.
There isn't. And it's why these conversations are so important. We need to weigh the benefits against the risks.
We do. And this isn't just about governments and corporations making decisions. Everyone has a role to play.
What can individuals do?
Support companies that prioritize ethics. Advocate for responsible regulations. Educate yourself. Talk to your friends and family. We all have a part to play in shaping this future.
It comes down to a simple question, doesn't it? Do we want technology to serve humanity, or do we want to be slaves to technology? It's a choice we all have to make. And the choices we make now will decide what kind of world we leave behind.
There's a great quote from Suleiman that sums this up. Containment is not, on the face of it, possible. And yet, for all our sakes, containment must be possible. It really highlights both the challenge and the responsibility we face.
That's powerful. But it's not just about preventing bad things from happening, right? Suleiman also talks about the potential for these technologies to solve some of the world's biggest problems.
That's right. Imagine AI helping us to develop personalized medicine, cure diseases, create a sustainable energy system. Imagine synthetic biology helping us to grow food in places that are struggling, clean up pollution.
Reverse the effects of climate change, even.
The possibilities are incredible.
But it's not going to happen by accident. It requires a conscious effort. We need to steer these technologies in the right direction, which brings us to...
Its idea of a global interest company.
I was fascinated by this concept. Can you explain how it would work?
The basic idea is that a global interest company would be legally obligated to consider the broader social impact of its actions. It's a big change from the typical shareholder-centric model that most companies follow today.
It's almost a revolutionary idea. Companies trying to do good while also making a profit? It almost seems too good to be true.
It's definitely a radical idea, but we're already seeing companies starting to incorporate social responsibility into their models. There's a growing awareness that business as usual isn't sustainable.
But how do we ensure that these global interest companies are genuine, that they're not just using social responsibility as a marketing ploy?
That's the challenge. It's going to require new ways of thinking about corporate governance, new ways of measuring success. It's a work in progress, but I think it's a direction we need to be moving in.
So it's not just about changing individual behavior, it's about changing the systems themselves.
Exactly. It's about creating a world where doing good is good for business.
I like that. So moving on to another of Suleiman's steps, this one really caught my attention. Technical safety. It seems so important, especially with these incredibly powerful and complex technologies.
Absolutely. We need to build safeguards right into these systems from the start. We can't keep playing catch-up, trying to fix problems after they've already happened.
So it's about anticipating the risks, designing for safety from the ground up.
Exactly. Think about kill switches for AI systems, redundancy in critical infrastructure, robust cybersecurity protocols. These are all things that need to be baked in from the beginning.
It's not just an afterthought.
Right. But I imagine it's hard to prioritize these things when there's so much pressure to innovate quickly, to get products to market first.
How do we balance that need for speed with the need for safety?
It's a tough question, but I think we're starting to see a shift in mindset. More and more people are realizing that rushing to market without considering the potential consequences is a recipe for disaster.
So it's about changing the definition of success. It's not just about being the first or the most profitable. It's about
It's about building things that are safe, sustainable, and ultimately beneficial in the long run.
And Suleiman stresses that technical solutions are only part of the equation. We also need human oversight, the idea of a human in the loop.
It's essential, especially with technologies that are becoming increasingly autonomous. We can't just abdicate responsibility to algorithms.
Like self-driving cars or AI weapons systems, those are.
Those are big ones.
We need to be clear about the limits of automation and make sure that a human is always accountable for the decisions that these systems make.
It's a fundamental ethical principle.
Right. And speaking of ethics, let's talk about audits and transparency. Suleiman argues that we need independent ways to scrutinize these powerful technologies, make sure they're being used responsibly.
Independent audits are crucial, but how do we guarantee that they're truly independent? That they're not influenced by the companies they're supposed to be auditing, it seems like.
Conflict of interest waiting to happen.
Exactly. We need to create oversight systems that are accountable to the public, not just to corporations. Maybe independent regulatory bodies, public disclosure of algorithms and data sets, strong whistleblower protections, those kinds of things.
So it's about checks and balances, making sure that power isn't concentrated in the hands of a few.
And this brings us to the need for international collaboration. Given the global nature of these technologies, it's clear that we can't do this alone.
It's tempting to think we can solve these problems within our own borders, but...
But that's just not realistic.
So what does Suleiman suggest?
He talks about the need for international agreements, joint research initiatives, shared monitoring systems. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
It makes sense. We need common standards, common goals.
Exactly. Because if every country is just doing its own thing, it's going to be chaos. We'll end up with a technological arms race, and nobody wins in that scenario.
And of course, we can't forget about public engagement.
Right, we need to bring people into the conversation.
But how do we talk about these complex issues in a way that's engaging and informative without overwhelming people?
It's a challenge, for sure. But it's about finding creative ways to communicate these ideas, using stories, analogies, real-world examples. And it's about creating spaces where people can ask questions, share their concerns, and feel like they're part of the solution.
He uses this phrase global movement, which sounds a bit...
Grandiose.
Yeah, but I think it captures the scale of the challenge and the need for collective action.
It's about creating a culture where ethical considerations are at the forefront of technological development.
So it's not just about experts making decisions, it's about everyone being involved in shaping the future.
And ultimately, it's about creating a world where technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about safety, transparency, global cooperation, public engagement. But one question that keeps coming back to me is, how do we actually change the culture of innovation? How do we move from this purely profit-driven model to a more holistic approach that prioritizes human well-being, it seems like?
A fundamental shift.
It is. And I don't know how we get there. So we ended the last part talking about changing the culture of innovation. It's this big question, right? How do we shift from a purely profit-driven model to something more holistic, where human well-being is the priority? It feels like a pretty daunting task.
It is daunting. There's no magic bullet, no single solution. It's a long-term project. It's going to require a lot of different people and groups working together to make it happen.
It's a cultural shift.
Exactly. And one piece of that is education.
Right.
If people don't understand these technologies, how can they make informed decisions about them? How can they demand better?
That's a good point. It's like we can't expect people to be responsible with something they don't even understand.
We need to start young, too. Incorporating this stuff into school curriculums, from elementary school up through university. It's not just about teaching kids how to use technology. It's about teaching them to think critically about it.
To understand the impact, the potential consequences.
Right. To be informed citizens in a world that's increasingly reliant on these technologies. It's not just technical skills. It's
digital citizenship.
Exactly. But it's not just about formal education either. Yeah. We need to raise awareness more broadly. Public awareness campaigns, documentaries, accessible articles and resources.
Yeah, make it engaging, not just dry technical stuff.
Right. Make it something that everyone can connect with, regardless of their background. and create spaces for open dialogue where people can ask questions, share their concerns without feeling intimidated.
One thing I really appreciate about Suleiman's book is that he's honest about the potential downsides of these technologies. He doesn't shy away from the risks.
It's refreshing, isn't it? So much of the conversation around technology is just hype and optimism.
Hmm.
But Suleiman acknowledges that these things can be used for good or for bad.
It's a reality check.
It is. He talks about the potential for inequality, for surveillance, even for existential threats. It's not all sunshine and roses.
It's serious stuff. But it's important to acknowledge those risks so we can find ways to mitigate them. We can't just pretend they don't exist.
And he also emphasizes the need for humility.
Mm.
We can't assume we have all the answers. These technologies are complex. We're still learning about them, and things can change quickly. We need to be,
Adaptable.
yes, and willing to course correct when necessary. It's not about clinging to a particular vision of the future. It's about being open to new information and adjusting our approach as needed.
So it's not blind faith in technology. It's about being.
Thoughtful, deliberate, and always asking ourselves, what are the potential consequences of our actions, both the good and the bad?
Okay, so there's a lot to be cautious about. But Suleiman isn't a pessimist, is he? He still believes we can shape a positive outcome.
Yeah, he's definitely optimistic, but he's also realistic. He recognizes that it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of collaboration, a lot of, courage to stand up for what's right, to challenge the status quo, to push for a better future. It's not just about preventing the worst-case scenarios. It's about actively working towards the best-case scenarios. And it starts with believing that those scenarios are possible, which brings us to,
Right.
it's not just a feeling, it's a motivator. It's what drives us to keep going even when things are tough. And it's contagious, too.
When you see someone who's genuinely hopeful, it's inspiring. It makes you want to be a part of that.
It's about believing that we can make a difference, that our choices matter, that together we can build a future that's worthy of our aspirations.
So practically speaking, what can we do? What can our listener do right now to contribute to this?
Well, first, educate yourself. Read books like The Coming Waves. Stay informed about these issues. Follow experts, organizations, researchers who are doing good work in this space.
Okay, stay informed. What's next?
Then, take action. Support organizations that are fighting for responsible innovation, ethical AI, those kinds of things. Contact your elected officials. Tell them this stuff matters to you. Make it an election issue.
Make them listen.
Exactly. And be a conscious consumer. Think about the products you buy, the companies you support. Do they align with your values?
Suleiman talks about this idea of being a conscious consumer of technology. It's like every choice we make sends a message.
And finally, be an active participant. Go to town hall meetings, join online discussions, write letters to the editor. If you see something wrong, speak up.
Don't be afraid to make your voice heard.
Exactly. We're not just passengers on this ride. We have the power to steer the ship. The more engaged we are, the more likely we are to create a future that benefits everyone.
That's a really empowering message. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway is this. The future is not preordained. We have a choice.
We do.
And it's not just a choice between utopia and dystopia.
It's a spectrum.
It's a whole range of possibilities. And the choices we make today will determine where we land on that spectrum.
So let's choose wisely.
Absolutely. Let's choose a future where technology serves humanity, not the other way around. To our listener, thank you for joining us on this journey. Keep exploring these ideas, stay informed, stay engaged.
And remember, the future is in our hands.
Until next time, stay curious.